Hey, I'm Lexi, and this is going to be in a regular shape. Today I'm going to do this Veuve bottle, and I have a few people here on Zoom with me, and then I'm going to record it for you guys, and so I'm going to be bouncing back and forth, and then I do have the baby monitor, so I need to apologize for that in advance, but here we go. So, first thing is you're going to cut your canvas, which can be daunting. So I always tell people to start bigger and then work your way down. You cannot regrow your canvas. In one of my previous classes, I talk about all the stuff you guys need. Do you want me to run over that really quick?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. So you need your canvas, obviously. I use quilting batting. It looks like this. It's in my Amazon storefront. I normally fold it into thirds when I'm doing everything. So I only have to cut everything once. So that will be here. Your backing fabric, whichever one you kind of decide. I'm in between right now what I'm gonna do, so I'm gonna leave both of those there. You will need mat board. This is just a piece that I'm gonna use. It's extra from everything else. You're gonna need a needle, your DMC invisible thread. This is from Amazon. It's on Prime Day right now. It's normally like $7 for this giant cone. I think it's on sale for $6. I use these quilting clips also from Amazon. It is definitely worth it to spend like $9 for 100 of them rather than $4 for 30 of them because they break super easily. So definitely splurge on that one. Let's see what else you're gonna need. Needle, thread, DMC, batting. I think that is everything. I wear these little leather thimbles because my fingers look like they are super beat up from sewing all the time. They're wonderful. I highly recommend them if you sew a lot because they're so great and they save my fingers so much. Scissors, so fabric scissors. I use my old beat up pair of kitchen scissors to cut my mat board. And then I have these little Fiskars for clipping thread. They cut DMC super great, and then it doesn't like fray or anything. So that's super wonderful. And then you will need, you don't necessarily need this, a lattice to make your cording. We will do cording and all of that together also. I highly recommend this. It was like $23, I think. But one of like the big differences I find between professional finishing and people who finish like recreationally, is the like tautness of their cording, and a lot of people struggle with cording, and this helps so much bridge that gap. So that is that. So I think that is everything. We are gonna get started. So, gonna cut my canvas, and I use my fabric scissors for that, and I will also use the little thread snippers too. The only thing is I don't want to use fabric scissors on mat board because they're like made for fabric and they cut so much nicer when you don't beat them up. So. I'm thinking about adding music to the recording in places where I'm not talking, or like it's just this, and I'm just like cutting stuff to make it like a little more fun. But I did have one lady tell me she liked how organic and how it wasn't overproduced. So, so what I do normally is I take a scan of irregular shapes. I am totally out of ink right now. Ink is also on sale for Prime Day. It's like half off. So I am gonna show you how I do it when I don't have ink, which is also nice for people who don't have scanners. So I will put my canvas onto the mat board. And so the base of the canvas right now is at the base of the Veuve bottle, like if I were to fold it over. And so I'm gonna take a fine point pen and I am going to dot in the mesh, or like around the canvas, and kind of do like a connect the dots sort of situation. And I'm still gonna have to like trim it up and make it perfect, or as close as perfect as I can. But this way it gives me the shape of it, and we're not just like blind cutting stuff. Also, I stick my tongue out a lot when I focus. I was that kid, I still am. So I'm also very sorry for that. Okay, So you can kind of see the dots. I don't know, maybe. I don't know. Literally doing connect the dots here. And as long as you're not drawing on the canvas itself, or like where the thread is, making dots and like you accidentally get one on the canvas isn't gonna hurt it at all. Okay. So that's not perfect, but let's see. The next, okay. All right, so this is not super great, but we're gonna make it work and we will eventually get to this shape. If you have a scanner, I highly recommend taking the scan of it, cutting that out, and then putting that down, rather than doing it this way. This way is a little bit more of like, you gotta trial and error, figure out exactly the shape. So the piece that's gonna go inside your canvas with the mat board is gonna be a little bit smaller than the piece that's gonna go in with your backing fabric, because you're gonna have more batting on your canvas side, and that's what's gonna make it puffier on the front, rather than more of like the cookie on the back. There's two like traditional styles of finishing. There's the cookie where it's a little bit puffier on the front and flatter on the back, and then there's the pillow style where it's like puffy on both sides, you know? And then there's also a girl on TikTok who is now like just telling everybody, don't do mat board, just do it like a total pillow, which honestly it's easier. I don't know how much that's gonna like hold up longevity wise though, but to each their own, you know? If that's what you want to do because it's easier for you, then so be it, you know? So let's see how this works here. So it's still a little big. So I'm gonna keep trimming this up really quick and try to get it as close as I can to what I need to. And so this also, this shape that's gonna go inside, it doesn't need to be perfect. I always think that like the inside of your canvas one, it's just like kind of got to be a cousin, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a twin, because when you roll over everything, you're gonna have your batting in there. You've already got the canvas. As long as it has enough stability and enough of the shape, then it's still gonna hold the correct shape. Does that make sense? So like this one's a little narrower on this side, but overall it's pretty close, right? So though it's not like the absolute most perfect thing, when I bend over my canvas and roll it, it's still gonna hold the shape. So, all right, so I'm gonna put this in my trash can really quick, and then I'm gonna cut this a little bit more. So any place there is a corner or it starts to dip in, I'm gonna cut more of a straight line and then take a little corner out, and I will show you as I work around. But so I find that this helps me create the shape more. Harder shapes, the more like complex it is, the more of these little like flaps we'll have, because that's what's gonna be our rollover. And I'll also sit here and like try to fold it and like manipulate it as we go. Okay, so like it goes in, a little tick there. I also attempt to like try to clean up a little bit as I go. Otherwise, I will be the messiest person in the land. So then like both of these sides are pretty, you know, just pretty flat. So then I'm able to just fold those in. I may still take a little bit off the other side, but it doesn't really get too irregular till we're up here. But so anywhere that you feel like you may need to pull a little bit more, you can just make an extra like little flap, and then that way it lets you manipulate it more. Oh, total side note. So my goal is to teach you guys how to finish things, right? So you don't necessarily need my finishing services, but if there ever is something that you're like, I can't do this one, or I'm not comfortable with it, because you take the class, I give you 10% off whatever order you send me. So that's neat. All right, so up in this bottleneck is where it's gonna get a little difficult, just because it kind of goes in here and not quite on this side, and then there's the different little like ridges up near the bottle, like where the cork would be. So this one does not have any extra rows. If depending on the shape, I have a cowboy boot that has a ton of extra rows. I will pull that out shortly and show you guys that too. So if it's got extra rows, it's nice too, because then when you're rolling over, you have a little bit of like a safety net. I don't think you necessarily need them for every shape. Some of them are definitely nicer to have. But some finishers don't recommend them, some do. It kind of just depends on the piece for me. And you'll also just like, as you finish more, you'll decide what you like, you know? Babies are good. So I'm not gonna, I don't use glue. I think I have glue in my Amazon storefront. So that is what I recommend though, if you are gonna use glue. So for irregular shapes, it can be sometimes hard to hold everything like in place and stuff like that. So some finishers will tell you that glue is a curse word. Others will tell you use it if you need to. If you're trying to like salvage a canvas or something, sometimes like it will definitely help you there. But that's something that like you decide kind of as you finish and what you're comfortable with, and all of that. Go to sleep, Reese. Okay. All right. Okay, so now I've got all the back cut, and then up here you can tell there's way more little flaps, and that's so I'm able to like tuck everything in to get to where I need to be here. I'm gonna show this up here to the camera too. So there's all these flaps, so we can get everything good. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna put my piece of mat board that I cut for the inside, and I'm gonna put that onto my batting, and I'm gonna trace it. And then I'm gonna cut that out. And if I'm ever going too fast at any point, please let me know. I know when you guys have the recording, so I edit it and like you can kind of slow down and everything too. But while we're here, like live here, if you're like, hey, slow down, I'll try to. Okay. So I am going to use all 3 layers for hers because I know this client and she likes hers to be just a tiny bit on like the puffier side on the front. So I'm going to lay this inside and make sure that it fits in there and make like a little sandwich, if you will, of it like sheds and it makes my nose so itchy. Canvas, batting, and then mat board. And so batting, the one on Amazon, I don't think it's super expensive, but you can get like multiple yards of it from Joann's. I got like a giant roll that literally will last me like 4 months for like 29 bucks. And they'll sometimes have coupons too. So, okay. So then when I have my little sandwich here with the batting and then the mat board. If I try to roll over my canvas, I can tell that the mat board is still just a little too big because I'm trying to roll it over and it's not where I want it to be. So you want that rollover to be as close to like, I normally say like a row and a half. So you don't want this row right here, especially if you don't have any extra rows. You don't want that one behind anything, like behind the mat board, but you want it to be as close to it as possible. But because I have that mat board, the batting in there, it makes the mat board need to be just a little bit smaller so you can fold everything over. That's good enough. And it definitely is a little bit of like trial and error, you know, until you get everything right and where you want it. Also, definitely take your time when you guys are doing this. I know I'm moving a little bit fast. I'm also trying to be like mindful of everybody's time, and I don't want to sit here and be like, here's a 2-hour-long video, buckle up. So I'm trying to get everything, all the information in, you know, and everything. And it's a class. It's not supposed to be a super quick 10-second tutorial watching on TikTok. You know, it's meant to be a little bit longer, but I also still want to be like mindful of your times, and you guys have lives, and needlepoint is not your whole life, I'm sure. So, all right. That is pretty close there. All right, so I need a little bit off that part there. And like in lieu of having classes all the time, I think I am gonna start trying to just go live when I'm finishing stuff too. So then if anybody sees it and they're like, ooh, I'm working on this, you can just pop on and ask me questions. But I am still gonna have classes too, just like in addition to that. I guess not in lieu of. A little bit problem. Okay, so I've got everything in there where it's gonna fit enough now, so I am going to lace up the back. And this is the part where if you were going to use glue, I would still recommend lacing it. But like gluing down some of the flaps may help you at this stage if you weren't like super comfortable with trying to lace. So I use my needle that I stitch my canvases with when I'm lacing. So just regular, like, I don't know if are they still considered embroidery needles? I don't know, I'm not sure, but needle that I stitch my canvases with. And then just DMC that I have left over from another canvas for lacing. So I do just a regular old knot. Oh no, Brooke, you're so good. Don't even worry about it. So I haven't eaten dinner and totally forgot. And I am not one of those people who's like, oh, I forgot to eat today. And I am slowly dying inside as I have to wait till I'm done with this to eat. So, we are gonna thread this bit. Okay, so I like to start on one end and then I'm gonna work my way up for lacing. I will say that I find personally that there is a correlation between how tight your lacing is and how good your canvas looks when it is completed and into an ornament. The tighter your lacing, the better it typically looks. And I will sometimes use clips to help me, so like I can push everything down and then just clip that into place so I can then move the other side. Sometimes I will, sometimes I won't. It just kind of depends on my mood that day. Sometimes when I'm doing a visible thread, I won't clip it just because it gets in the way and it'll anger me. And I don't need to raise my blood pressure anymore at needle point than it is throughout the day with staying home with a 2- and 3-year-old. So. For this minute while we lace everything up. So I got asked last time I was lacing how far over I go. So from where the stitch part of the canvas is, I will go as close as 4 rows. Sometimes it's further out. It kind of depends on the integrity of the canvas. You can kind of feel it and tell how strong it is. If you know it's an older one or it's super flimsy, or sometimes if people stitched it in hand and rolled it a whole bunch, it's not like, it doesn't have tons and tons of integrity. So you just kind of have to also be mindful of that, because you don't want to go through too far and pull and then it rip your canvas, because you do want to be holding everything taut and you want to pull it a little bit. But I also recommend like holding your canvas with one hand like pretty tightly and then pulling it, because you want to make sure you're holding it all together. And at the same time, you have to be a little bit careful, because it can also just break, and then you don't want to be left with a broken canvas and then a weird little piece sticking out, because that is a pain in the butt. Also, I find it incredibly funny that my job relies on like string, and I hate string so much. I will sit here and just get very angry at it. So I'm gonna do this part and then I'm gonna show you guys as I work my way up. also do my best not to stab myself while on camera. But let me tell you, it can be a little bit daunting. I also complain about my neck pain to my husband pretty regularly from stitching and finishing, and I find that I sit here and I stitch like this, which is the most attractive thing ever, let me tell you. But I'm trying to like have better posture and everything, and so I feel like recording these helps with it a little tiny bit because I'm trying to be more mindful of not showing everyone my like extra 4 chins. But if you do happen to see them, I apologize. They like to make an appearance. Okay, so I have this bottom section laced up. I'm gonna keep going. It's not super tight yet, so I'm just gonna keep working this part until it gets to a level of like tightness that I am happy with. And that's something too that you kind of decide over time, like you'll know how you feel, like when you feel a canvas, you'll be like, okay, that's good. You don't want it like moving around a ton between the batting and the mat board and everything. Like you want it to be a good solid like feel and piece. And so like that too will come with time. But when you are just starting to do irregular shapes, I would say if you can take your like thumbs and wiggle the back of the canvas and it doesn't shift too much, that's like a good like point of reference, I guess, is what I'm looking for there. Okay, so I'm gonna start working my way up here to like the curve part. And that's where it's gonna get a little trickier just because the canvas is cut more into the thin strips, and that's when it starts to break a little bit more. So you gotta be very careful about the pieces you're going through and how tight you're pulling them. I personally find that for irregular shapes, it's easier to do 18 mesh rather than 13. 13 with the bigger pieces, like obviously like when you pull through, it's a little more likely to rip. The integrity of 18 is just a little bit nicer in my opinion. But there are so many fun things that are on 13 that we just deal with it. So like I've got this one little tiny piece right here. And instead of lacing, like trying to pull through that, because I feel like that one may probably rip, I'm gonna just put a piece like of the DMC right over him and hope that I could just kind of tuck him down, because that one just doesn't seem super stable to me right now. I also should probably be wearing my glasses while I do this, because that would be way helpful. What was that? Oh. Just have one of those little quilting clips pop. That is on another piece I'm working on right now. So I do apologize for how long that took. The lacing of irregular shapes definitely takes a little bit longer. Circles and rectangles I can get through pretty fast. But these ones, like, I just, you know, wanting to make sure that everything is tight and is a good clean lace. It does take a little bit extra time, but I do feel like it's worth it, so. So though this one piece, I tried to go over it, I did rip that one, so I am gonna try again to just get it to tuck in a little bit, but that piece is not wanting to cooperate with me. I might be able to catch one of those little frays there. Also, so like whatever your lacing looks like, no one is gonna see it on the inside of your canvas. So if you are all over the place, that is okay too. Whatever you're able to do to get it nice and tight and everything, that's what's best, even if it is all over the place. So, all right, so I am pretty happy with this right now. I got a few little stragglers that are sticking out and everything, but I'm gonna tuck those in when I put my cording on. So this is what the back looks like right now. So it's not super, super organized or anything, but so I'm gonna tie this into a knot and then clip this piece off. But it's gonna hold everything tight enough and in that we are able to. We're gonna move on to the back half of it. So I'm gonna take my mat board again and I'm gonna put my new piece up onto it. And I am gonna trace this, and that's gonna give me more of an accurate shape than it was when we did like the dotted line sort of technique. So I'm gonna do that really quick. Okay, so then I have that shape. You guys see that enough? And I'm just gonna cut that out. So for regular shapes, I normally use my Cricut to cut everything out. Just because you want circles to be circular, you know, squares to be as square as you can. And mat board isn't always the easiest to cut by hand. So that's what I do. They also make, I don't know what it is called, but it makes a circle and cuts it for you. I will put one in my Amazon because it's super helpful. I don't know how to use it, but a bunch of my friends who are finishers, they use it and they love it too, who don't have Cricuts. So, all right, so then I'm gonna make sure that this lines up and is good. If it is over by just a tiny bit, I'm normally okay with it, but I'm gonna try to trim it up as much as I can too. Also, another thing that I will inevitably mess up, which side is like the front of the mat board that's gonna touch the back side of your canvas and which is the other side. So for like this bottle, it's pretty symmetrical. But I'm gonna write batting on this one side and then canvas on this side. I will, if I'm not paying super attention for something like a boot where it's gotta go in a certain direction, right? Where the toe is gonna point one way. Once you have your fabric and batting and everything, you can't flip it because you're trying to make like a big sandwich ultimately. So it can sometimes be helpful to write down which level of the sandwich you're working with, if that makes sense. So like the side that I wrote canvas on is going to touch the canvas. So I'm going to trim that just a little bit more. But I definitely have like gotten everything laced up on the fabric side before. And then I'm like, oh, awesome. This doesn't fit here because it faces the other direction. That side. Sorry, there was a boom. I'm checking the monitor. Oh, he lost a toy. Toy has been found, we're good, okay. All right, so then I'm gonna take the cut batting again and I am going to trace it onto mat board, onto batting. It would be cool if I could call everything by the correct name all the time. I do feel like that got worse after having a second child. Brain doesn't totally work the right way anymore. Okay, so now back to making a sandwich. So your batting for the backside is gonna go fabric, batting, mat board. And I wrote down canvas and batting on mine to make sure that I know which side is which. I'm only gonna use 2 pieces, so I don't want that to be quite as puffy. I'm gonna trim it just a tiny bit. And I'm gonna cut my fabric. And you also don't need tons and tons of fabric for your pieces. So like, this is how big this one is, and I'm still gonna cut off excess of this in a little bit. Some people will send, you know, a fat quarter or even like more than that, and then they're like, how much do I need? If you're going to Joann's and you know you have whatever shape, I would say either get the size of your canvas or get 2 inches by 2 inches bigger than the painted size. So like whenever you order your canvas, it'll tell you painted size is 4x4 or, you know, 5x7, something like that. That's what I recommend, kind of going just a little bit bigger for your fabric, because that gives you sort of like a seam allowance if you were sewing on a sewing machine, you know? So now I have this. I am going to use my embroidery needle again. It would be wonderful if I knew where I put that. Did I throw it away? Probably. Oh, there it is. It gets stuck to my scissors all the time because I keep a needle minder on my desk. And so the magnet has now like totally magnetized my needle. And if I can't find it, it always seems to be on my scissors. So, okay, I am gonna get some DMC and thread the fabric side now. So the super fun parts are what is after all of this when we do the invisible thread. I double up my invisible thread to make like a big loop, you know, like a circle. I recommend doing that because it's going to give you more strength. Invisible thread likes to pop. And nobody likes to deal with that. I have more people tell me, hey, I want to finish this. They get to the invisible thread part and then they're like, wow, this is why there are finishers. Invisible thread is awful. I hate it. So just be super, super patient with yourself and with it. And I promise that you will get through it, but it really does suck. So doubling it up helps. It will make it far less hard, like less likely to pop. And then also it will help when you're tying it off too. Instead of like trying to tie one piece of very tiny invisible thread, you'll then have the two pieces to like tie into a knot. All right, so I am just cutting off a little bit of excess here and then I'm gonna start lacing everything. With fabric, I am gonna go from the bottom straight to the top and then I'm gonna go side to side. This way I'm just trying to make sure that the top and the bottom are gonna be taut so that I can work on the sides being taut too. Because if I were to just go like that, we would end up with like a totally cattywampus piece of fabric. So. So do y'all have any sewing experience, or are you just needle pointers who wanted to finish your own stuff because you didn't want to deal with like turnaround times and the cost?
I have a little sewing experience, but like mostly hand sewing. And my husband, like, he knows how to work our embroidery machine. He knows how to work the sewing machine. He knows how to do all of that stuff. So I'm like, all right, if he can do it, I can do it.
Right.
So I can hand sew, but like in the machine, I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm like, I can do hand finishing, but other than that, I'm like overwhelmed.
Okay.
You'll be great. I'm a teacher, so I've been teaching for 30 years. And I just went from teaching primary kids, little kids, to high school, and I teach sewing.
Oh yeah, so I used to teach home ec and did a whole sewing section.
Oh, yeah.
And then I taught culinary arts and interior design.
Oh, yep, that's exactly what I teach.
Yeah.
We call it facts.
Yeah, I was a facts teacher.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
Where are you located?
I'm in Minnesota.
Okay, I taught in Maryland. I taught facts there, and then I taught culinary in South Carolina because they didn't have the whole facts program here, and I was a hospitality major and everything, so I had all the culinary background. And then with my teaching certificate, they were like, "Oh, you can do all of that already," and I was like, "Okay."
Yeah, that's what happened to me too. So good for you, and now you're doing it online. So
well,
you can be a stay-at-home mom and make yourself some extra money.
Yes. So after COVID, I had my 3-year-old, and then immediately after had my 2-year-old, because they tell you birth control is important, and we did not take that talk seriously. And and so then my husband was like, well, if you want to do this and stay home, do it. So I started finishing full time, and now I thought I would start trying to do some online classes.
Good for you. I stayed home. I waited a long time to be a mom, and my son is Korean born. And so I stayed home and had a sewing school for children.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, so when you can sew, I did see that lady on TikTok do the pillow and sew by hand, and I kept thinking, oh, you can do it under the machine.
Oh, totally. So machines are not nearly as intimidating as they seem.
No.
And I wish more
And I'm
people.
sorry I missed your name, but if you have an embroidery machine, then you can embroider on your back fabric before you put it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or you can have your husband do it. He can yeah.
So I had a friend who's an embroiderer, and I was like, just send me the link, whatever I need, and that's what I'll get. And so she just gave us the machine, and it was like completely messed up, so old. So he had to do like the computer programming part of it to like make fonts that like made sense today. But I just bought this fabric. I don't know if you can see, it's got like little scissors on it.
Yes.
And I want to like hand sew like a little bag or something for all of my like needlepoint accoutrements. And now I'm like, no, it's time to get out the sewing machine. We can do it.
You can definitely do it. You can definitely do it.
Go into TikTok and just type in a small bag and you'll find 25 tutorials.
I know.
You can do it. And because you're a hand sewer, you'll understand the concept.
Yeah.
You're like, some people can't visually look at it and, you know, like understand different parts. So you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
All right, Lexi, I have a question.
Yes.
How long is that thread? That looks massive. Are we using one continual thread this whole time?
I like to use one continual thread. Sometimes I will have it be too short and then I have to tie them together, and I find it's a pain in the butt. Okay. So when I am lacing, I normally use a piece of DMC that is like my wingspan. Okay. And because I'd rather have extra and cut it off, but this is also like leftover from, I just made cording for a piece, and it was leftover, and so it wasn't going to be big enough to use for another piece of cording. So I keep like a little stash of all of those, and and so that's just what I use those for. So like it could have been a shorter piece. This just happened to be a decently long one. But so I've got the whole backside now like laced up, and so this is as tight as I need it to be. So with the fabric too, I will like kind of pinch and roll it together to make sure that it's taut everywhere I need it to be, before I just sit there and sew and like have tons and tons of extra fabric. There are a few pieces I'm gonna just go back over really quickly, but we are almost ready to stitch them together.
As a finisher, do you prefer when we like send in our own like cording material, or are you just like, listen, I've got it under control?
Totally doesn't matter either way. Sometimes it's super helpful because you're like, I've already picked this out. This is exactly what I want.
We have a vision.
I'm sorry?
There's like definitely like a vision, I think. Like when
right. So like you definitely, some people will say, this is what I want, I have a vision. But I will also get some people who are like, you do this every day. You may look at my piece and think, this is gonna look so much better if you do it that way. Like, so she sent me pink and I think yellow, right, for this. But I think I want to do pink, yellow, and blue instead of the yellow. And like, so this client I know very well. She sent me tons of stuff. For the most part, if I could tell her, hey, I think purple is gonna look best, and she said, okay, you know, roll with it. And as long as like it actually ends up looking good, then she doesn't really care, you know. But I will say there's definitely some people who do not want you to take those creative liberties. So like that's the really nice part about an intake form. I have like twist color options where I'm like, put your preference. If you have no preference, some people put finisher's choice. I like to have an open line of communication when I'm finishing, and I will obnoxiously text people. And I apologize to them in advance because I will text them like pictures of cording, pictures of this, be like, hey, just want to make sure like we still love this, you know, because you spend so much money on a canvas and on fibers and on everything else. And so if you get it back and you're like, this isn't what I wanted, that would just stink, you know? And I don't want anybody to feel that way. So I make it as annoying as possible to, for them, when I'm like, hey, I just want to make sure you absolutely love it, you know?
Yeah, like I have a few things out at a finisher right now, and it's through my LNS. So it's like I gave them the piece, and then I won't see it for months.
Right.
And then like she was like, "Here's a picture that I got from him of like it's being matted and like framed," and I'm like, "You still have it? It's still there." Like
well,
it's just.
So I will say, I finished for.
Communication is so much more important.
I finished for a few stores, and what I will say is I don't love it as much because I don't get to like have the conversation with the client. Yeah. And so whatever is on their form, like that's how we have to go. So like not to like talk poorly about LNSs, they do overcharge out the wazoo because they have overhead and stuff. You know, in independent finishers, we can charge a little bit less because we're typically at our homes or things like that. But I truly, the benefit of having that open communication, I feel like is so much more beneficial than being like, all right, sending this off, see you in a few months, you know? So, okay, so I now have...
And my finishers are like crazy expensive at local needle store.
Yeah. Well, and that's why so many people want to learn how to finish on their own because, you know, to kind of bridge that gap a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's just... It's so
expensive. The wait time. Like everything at our local LNS had to be turned in by June for Christmas.
Yeah. So I will say, beauty of also being independent is so like I don't have a deadline for Christmas right now. So my turnaround time is between 5 and 10 business days. So I do 5 to like 6 pieces a day. But that's what works for me. You know, I have finisher friends who don't put out quite as much, but they also have jobs. Not that being a stay-at-home mom isn't a job. Speaking of, sorry, he's had a toy in his mouth. But I have a little bit more flexibility. I also don't really sleep. Because between toddlers and my husband is a police officer and has weird schedules, I am just awake and finishing at all hours. But that works for me, you know? Like weekends aren't real weekends for me often because my husband will be working, so then I just sit here and finish. But then it'll also be like a random Tuesday and I'll call people and be like, hey, do you guys want to go get dinner? And they're like, what are you talking about? We have work. And I'm like, oh, real jobs. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so I just made a big, huge loop with my invisible thread. So my needle's gonna stay on here. It's not gonna fall off. You can't really see it because it is invisible thread, but I promise I just tied a regular old knot on the end of this one. And then needle this. I'm gonna put my little thimbles on because my fingers look like they have been beaten to death by needles. So I am gonna put my cording up here at the very top. It's gonna come out up here. So I'm not gonna sew that part shut yet. I do a running whip stitch to get my cording and my canvas together. I will say I will pinch the absolute bejesus out of these 2 pieces to get them as close as possible when I'm sewing my invisible thread, like to the point that my hand will cramp. So be prepared, or like, some people use little actual like clamps when they're doing it so they don't have to sit there and squeeze it to death. So, all right, keep going here. So I also want to say it's super important to make sure that you are going through actual canvas and not just going through threads. Because you want to make sure you're not pulling your threads, especially like if you do any decorative stitches, like satin stitch is super easy to pull. I can't do a running whip stitch when I'm finishing things with satin because it will pull them inevitably. And we want everything to look the same way it did when it got sent to me from a client. So you just kind of have to be careful with that. But if you go through just the threads, it's gonna pull. So you want to make sure you're going through canvas as much as you can. And then with invisible thread too, you also want to be sorry, I'm talking with the needle in my mouth. You want to be mindful of where, like when you have the two threads, where the loop's going. You don't want it to like get stuck on a corner or another piece. That's when you get the random, just invisible thread, like strands across your whole canvas. And it bothers the heck out of me. It may not bother you at all. I think that's just something that kind of you like learn and decide over time. But if you get anything professionally finished, you'll never have those threads like randomly strung across your canvas or the back of your canvas. And so that's just one of the like little kind of things that you notice between the two.
What kind of needle are you using, a straight or curved?
So I use a straight needle, but I bend the heck out of it. So I don't know if that even like really helps. So I have it molded to my thumb. A curved needle is better, especially when you're doing cording, because it's gonna go under and over, whereas like it's not gonna pull random threads. But I will say there's a learning curve with the curved needle. This is just what works best for me. I do have in the Amazon storefront, there was like the pack of needles came with some of the curved ones. It's just kind of what you're comfortable with. But it definitely is easier when it has a little bit of a curve to it. So for cording, I'll tell you guys my little like formula, if you will. So for two color strands, I do 8 to 9 pieces of DMC for like the thickness. And if I do 3 colors, I do 5, 5, and 6. But I will also sometimes just kind of go off of vibes. If like one of them I feel like needs to be a little thicker, I don't always necessarily go by the formula, but I mean, I try to stick to it also because it's a good baseline. A lot of times I get questions about, you know, the length of cording and the thickness of cording, and then how to make it stay coiled. And I feel like those are like the 3 like main questions I get. That, and then how do you lay the invisible thread to not be able to see it? Which I will go over that when we are doing that part too. So, what time is it right now? Okay, so 9:12. So we're not doing too bad on time. I apologize. So it's normally like right at 2 hours, but then when I cut down the video to give you guys the recording, it's like right at an hour normally. I'm trying to tell if I'm invisible still. So I have a loop here from, can you guys see that? Like a little bit if I do it in the light. So up here is like 2 or 3 stitches back. So as long as I can pull the invisible thread, like you can still pull it pretty hard and it'll still shut all the way. But that one got looped around the bottom there. So you just have to be like constantly checking that too to make sure you have both sides of that. There's also the issue if you go too fast, it will knot on you. And so that's super fun. Let's see if I can get that one out. Come on. There we go. So I do apologize. This is like the slow part on here. So I'm gonna turn off the camera really quick just so that we can. Okay, so I have everything stitched up now, and I'm gonna make my cording and get it ready before I stitch it on to get how much, like the correct length of cording that I need. So I'm gonna put this down and then I will show you guys the like flat lay of it here in a second. So I go around the entire shape loosely. I am so not gonna have enough of this color. We'll just do this one. So I go around the shape loosely, and then I also make sure that I have enough for the hanger, like the hanging loop too. And so I kind of eyeball that, but at some point you kind of get a feel of how big that is. So do my starting point, loosely around it. And weird shapes too, like, so people, you don't want to waste tons and tons of resources, but I will say it's easier to have a little bit of extra like cording made and just clip it rather than not have enough and then have to make a whole second strand to make your loop. Because you know, it's just kind of a pain, and like you're already halfway there, like why give yourself that extra step? So that is about how long I need. I'm gonna lay it back down here in 1 second to show you guys how I get that. So I'm gonna, for 4-inch rounds and stuff, I find that it's normally a little bit less than my wingspan. And I'm like 5'6". I don't know if that's helpful or not, but. So then I also have this, someone taught me this in one of my classes actually, this little trick, and you guys might know it, but I didn't, and I do this professionally, so I was like, whoa. So when you are pulling DMC out of its little skein, right, so if you take off the bottom loop, and then you hold the top piece, and you pull your string, the whole thing doesn't get knotted. I literally was like, whoa. It doesn't work with the pearl cotton, but it works with the 6-strand embroidery floss.
That was literally worth every penny I own right now. That wasn't.
It literally blew my mind. Like the amount of DMC I've thrown out because it has turned into a big knot, and I have just been like, nope, I will buy another skein. Darn you, string.
You can also leave that long thing on, so the longer of the tubes, hold that loosely and pull from that side, and it'll always come out that side.
Wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't had luck doing it that way, but I will try that with the next one too. But this one works for me really well. But we will try that one also. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 on this one. Oh man, there goes the nest. I swear, because it hears me talking about it. really sorry to all of you who had to pay for this to watch me try to undo a knot. Looks like we're gonna do 5. We'll do 6 on the next color. Also, if you guys watch my other videos or like tutorials that I'm attempting to put out, my sister says I do something called the millennial pause, where I don't talk immediately and I like check to make sure it's on and then I speak. And I try really hard to not do it, but apparently it is inevitable. Okay, so Julie, you're saying leave this one on too.
Yeah, so lightly hold where your fingers are.
Okay.
And then pull from that side. You always pull from that side.
So that yeah, so I'm still getting a knot there.
You are? I don't.
Okay. Well, that wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. We were able to salvage it.
I'm always worried about that number. I don't want to lose the number.
Yeah, so what I'll sometimes do is, so like I still have the number for that pink one. Like I'll like tape a piece to it. But also
I've been tying mine through the tube.
right, well, and like tying it through the tube is good too. But also having that book is nice too, because if I have any like physical piece of it, I'll just sit there and hold it up to it, you know.
Yeah, the book's a great idea.
Highly recommend the book. It's on Amazon Prime sale right now. I don't have it in my storefront, but it is on sale because one of my finisher friends bought it because she was like, "Oh, is this useful?" And I was like, "The utmost." It's also nice too because DMC will have sales on like their website, and then like if you know kind of what colors you need to, then you're not trying to figure out if the color online is different. You know, the book at least is, I find, to be very, very consistent.
And painters go by DMC colors.
Yes, yes. That's because Stitchly, for the most part, when like you put in a picture to Stitchly or like you make a chart on there, it automatically goes into DMC unless they change it to something else. We're so close, come on. Okay. So I knocked off both of my ends. You don't necessarily have to do that. It's just what I like to do. And then I'm going to clip it down to my outgoing mailbox, which I'll put up here, and then use my lattice. So the first twist that you do, so the lattice is numbered 1 and 2, which is super helpful. But if you are twisting your cording by hand, you want to make sure that that first directional twist that you do, you are going far enough that it is trying to coil in on itself. That is how you know it is going to be nice and good and taut and everything. Can you guys still see me? So I've got more of my little quilting clips over here. Also, please excuse that it's super gross because it is old. Oh, I didn't show you guys how I do this, so I'm gonna, also my desk is clear, so I'm gonna apologize. You guys are gonna see my lap. So I loosely will wrap this around whatever shape, and then make enough for a loop, which I realize that loop is really big, but whenever you are twisting anything, it's gonna shrink, right? Because you're using, you're like losing surface area. and I'm sure there's a scientific term for that. I do not know it. But so this will end up being a little bit shorter than this, and so make it just a little bit on the longer side. This lattice comes with 4 little prong thingies. I literally used my Conair one from when I was in like middle school until it died recently, and then I bought this. But the 4th little peg made me angry, but they all pop in and out too, so you can switch it to 4 if you were doing 4 colors. I prefer to do 3 strands. I find that it holds tension much better than 2. And then 4 kind of looks a little weird, in my opinion, but to each their own. I had one that was like very vineyard vinesy, and I wanted to do like all 4 colors that were in the canvas. So you're gonna hear the noise from this for a second, so I do apologize. So when it gets to a point where, can you guys see that, how it coiled in on itself? I'm gonna try to stand behind it so it coils into like little curly cues. I'm not sure.
So yeah, we can see it.
Okay, wonderful, because I'm trying to look at it and I can't tell. So then, so if you pull it all straight again, I do just another like 1 or 2 like little seconds of that to make sure everything's straightened out again. But so that's how you know your first twist is taut enough. And that's what's gonna give you like nice, good looking cording. That's also like one of the big differences. The people who do it recreationally or the people who do it professionally, you can always kind of tell with the cording. So then gonna go the other direction. So sorry for the noise again.
When you do it the first time, can you over twist it? Can you go too far?
So I don't, so if I over twist it here, it'll pop out of the clips. And that's kind of the only way that I can tell I over twist it, because it's like, it's too taut for the length of the other ones. Like if 1/3 of it is like just a little bit shorter and then I'm twisting, and one of them is twisted too much, it'll just pop out. So then I have to like go back and get that all situated. So I also will twist this the second way until it'll coil in on itself. Again, just because I like it to be as tight as possible when I start, because then as I'm like going, everything kind of will come undone and loosen up just a little tiny bit. Like even when I put in, so then I'm tying these 3 strands into just a regular knot. It's gonna get a little bit looser naturally, but that first coil is what's gonna give you the ability to get it back to like this tautness as you have it on there and can like twist around and stuff. So other side, just regular knot, and then I'm gonna clip off these extra guys just so I don't have too much bulk on the inside of this. All right, so now I have my cording and my canvas, and I still have my invisible thread with my needle still just hanging out here. And so this is the part that is harder on camera for me, so please bear with me on this. I find I struggle with it when I'm trying to focus on other people and everything, so I'm gonna try to focus on just this and still talk. But I will be FaceTiming my sister, and I'm always like, I have to go, I'm doing this part, I can't do everything. So I'm gonna tuck my knot in up here. I'm gonna try to get it in as far as I can with my finger, and then I'm gonna go to a Bic pen to push it down further if I need to. There's no like correct depth for how far you push it in. It's whatever like you feel comfortable with. I like mine to be a little bit on the like deeper side, if you will. Just because that way I feel like I can kind of flatten the ornament back out. Because Because especially like if you have two giant knots, like right at the top, it's gonna make it look a little lumpy, you know? So if you're able to push them down and kind of work them through, it makes it look way more like symmetrical. I don't know if symmetrical is the right word. Flat, more appealing. Not positive. Take that for what it's worth. Okay. Also, so like this bottle, since it's so narrow up here, it is making these threads like a little bit loose. So I'm gonna pull these taut, and then I am gonna sew back down a little bit just to make sure that like it's as tight as it can be while that string's in there too. Just 'cause we wanna make sure everything fits. Come on. Okay, so then I'm gonna move this over to the side as much as I can without getting it all tangled up. And so whichever side that I just stitched, so like the same place where the invisible thread is, that's where I'm gonna go down. So at this point too, I'm gonna do a lot of like pinching and holding together to make sure that I'm getting the cording where I need it to be. So I'm gonna first kind of push it down. You also wanna make sure you're not crushing your cording at all. But so I'm gonna go around and clip it in certain spots. I didn't do this in one class and a lady was like, oh, why didn't you clip it? She was very distraught about it. She was wonderful though, but and I was like, oh, my invisible thread gets caught and it makes me angry. I don't want to cuss on camera. So I will do my best to not do that. My high school students always thought it was really funny when I would like accidentally touch a hot pan or cuss. And they were like, oh, we love it. It's like seeing a dog walk on its hind legs. Okay. So where it dips in right here, I'm gonna leave just a little tiny bit extra to make sure that get that exactly how I want to. That's probably gonna pop off and shoot me in the face later. So then I still have all this extra cording. Wherever I decide the loop is gonna be, when I get to that other side, I will probably put a knot about there and cut this again, but I would rather have extra than not enough. So like, yes, I'm wasting materials, but it's not tons and tons of materials. And at this point, like, I'd rather it be perfect than have to go back. So for this particular one, it's gonna be fine. So I am gonna pick one of the colors. And so for right now, I think I'm at between my two pinks, which is gonna be the best place for me to take my invisible thread and lay it at an angle across and go in between those two pieces of thread with my invisible thread, or two pieces of cording and go through with my invisible thread. And I'm gonna lay it in between the two of those in the groove, and that's how I'm gonna hide my cording. And by cording, I mean this, and I'm really sorry. So taking invisible thread, putting it in between cording, that's what's gonna keep it invisible. I'm gonna show you really quick with a blue string so you can see it to know where I'm talking about putting it. I realize there's also blue, but I'm gonna lay it in between the two pinks, so hopefully you can see everything. So my invisible string is right there. I'm gonna go literally through that. Can you see between the two pinks where the blue is? So that's where my invisible thread's gonna go. I'm gonna show you guys up here. It's gonna go right in between those. And so I'm gonna do that around the whole thing, but I'm gonna make sure that I am in between those two colors the whole way around, because then all of my stitches are gonna be evenly spaced, and that all of the cording is gonna be like secured well, right? Because if everything's evenly spaced, it should, in theory, keep it all on there. So like that way too, like when you're holding your ornament or like hanging it on a tree, or then your cat rips it off or something, the cording's not just gonna come off. It's gonna keep everything super secure. So I am going to tuck in any sort of little sprigglies, and then I'm gonna hold everything as tight as I can. And then I'm gonna lay that thread. So for me, that one went through the darker pink and the blue. I know I said the two pinks, but so that's when I just went through, that's kind of where it landed a little more naturally. So I am gonna stick with that pattern for now, for me. But it was a little bit easier to show you guys with the two pinks and the blues, so that's good. Okay, I am gonna turn off the recording and get this stitched up, and then I will be right back to that. That was the millennial pause there, me waiting to make sure that the camera was on. Okay, so I now have the whole thing stitched back up, and I still have this giant extra for the loop, but I am also gonna make a knot, so I'm not gonna take off too much of it. I think I'm gonna do probably about there. So I am gonna go just a tiny bit down from there and make an extra knot, and then cut off my extra cording. And so, like, grand scheme of things, like losing 2 inches, yeah, about 2 inches of cording is not too bad. If that's all of your waist, I feel like that's decent margins for everything. So then I'm gonna go back and just tuck this knot in here to the best of my ability, and then I'm gonna sew it all shut. I'm gonna try to squash that knot too. And then she wants a ear charm, so once I get all of this on there and I have it nice and tight and everything, I'll put the ear charm on absolutely last. But so gonna sew this up. And then I'll also, like, at that point, kind of do quality control and make sure that everything, like, there's no canvas sticking out, that, you know, the cording's covering everything that it's supposed to. Like, I just had a little tiny spriggly stick out of the top there, so, like, just ran my needle across it and kind of push it back in. Making sure everything looks as good and as secure as humanly possible. I'm gonna put my little thimble back on, because when I'm trying to push through all that is when the needle will decide to go through my finger. So, and also, like, depending on how close your knot is to the top, sometimes you'll end up trying to, like, go through the knot. So just be careful too when you're pushing your needle through, that you don't accidentally go jamming it into your other finger trying to push really hard to get it through everything. And then some people also have asked, you know, is it okay if I, like, accidentally go through the mat board? Absolutely. You're not hurting the mat board at all by, you know, accidentally going through it. You may have to change needles, and you may need a new needle faster if you're going through mat board, but that's because it's going to dull it. But that is the worst thing that will happen to your mat board, unfortunately, you know, if you go through it. So. And so right now I am just trying to get that top part as closed and as tight as possible, because I do have the 2 knots there, and with it being the weird shape, it's just a little, you know, narrow and everything. So I do want to try to get it to look as good as possible. So I am just really, like, pinching it shut right now and sewing through, just trying to make sure that we are nice and as tight as possible and everything is closed, because we also don't want it to, like, randomly, you know, decide to pop open, or, you know, have any of the knots pop out or anything too. So, like, going back and forth through it is definitely helpful, especially if you go through your knot, whether it is on purpose or on accident. Going through the knot can help too, just because that way it is sewn in place. Come on, cording. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna push just this down a little bit. I had a little spriggly pop out. So I'm gonna lay that back in between my cording. And then sometimes if I'm gonna cut my invisible thread, I'll go down, like still laying it through all the colors like we did before. And I'll just go down a little bit of ways to make sure that when I'm tying it off, it's not gonna be in a place where if it were to come undone, that it would cause any harm. Like it's where it's definitely not gonna unravel. So I find that like going down, you know, a handful of extra stitches never hurts. So I'm gonna cut that and then tie it off. And then I'm gonna come back up here and make my knot. If I could make a knot. Make sure everything is good. And there you have it. So, all right, I'm gonna turn this off.